welcome to another edition of Track Breakdown. I'd like to thank my sponsors. Just kidding, I don't have any sponsors, but your name here. No, thank you for tuning in. I'm going to do this one a little differently. I asked the internet for questions, and questions were received. So I'm just going to kind of scroll through them and talk about the song and answer some questions and do all that kind of stuff. So yeah, this is my song Time to Melt. I got a lot of questions about drums, and what better place to start? So the fundamental building block for me for this song was this weird drum machine loop. And it's just my Rhythm King through my Korg sampling delay, which is the SDD2000 hardware unit. And my friend Spencer Tweedy was here working on a book, and we were talking about recording, especially in a DIY framework. And he was like, "Oh, just show me what your process is like these days. Like, what are you into?" And I just fired up the drum machine and kind of played around until that loop happened and captured it. And then later I came back to it and I was like, "Oh, this is actually pretty weird." And the modulation of the sampling delay, it was fully wet, and so it was modulating, and it just was doing this cool thing to the tom sounds of the Rhythm King. So I kept it and came back to it and played around with it and ended up putting some guitar chords down. And of course, because I had the Korg fired up, I just rolled with it and played guitar through that, and that sounds like this. Weird, kind of dark, sexy chords. And then I kept rolling with the Korg guitar sound, increased the feedback a little bit, and came up with this little riff. Which is just, harmonized pentatonic noodles. You can hear the modulation of the Korg. I actually wrote down my settings here in my Pro Tools notes. It's feedback at 24, time at 70 milliseconds. Frequency of the modulation was at 6. And the intensity was at 2. So sometimes I put down settings for my hardware stuff and come back to it if I want to recreate that sound. But the Korg box is given to me years ago, and I looked it up on eBay, and it was like $100. And of course now, I think if you were to do a quick search, they're probably quite overpriced. Korg SDD, mine's the 4000. Yeah, 2000. I mean, Korg SDD 2000. I'm not on the internet. Oh, the internet is out here. Anyway, you'll have to take my word for it. Okay, where was I? Korg box guitars, yeah. So, if you haven't checked out those Korg boxes, UAD makes a plugin of the version up from mine, which is the 3000. But it's a great plugin, and it has a pretty cool feature set. The hardware box has 2 outputs, and their phase is flipped, so you can do this really trippy stereo stuff, or false stereo, or whatever. And the plugin also features that, so it's a great stereo delay. Really strange chorus sounds, as you can see here. It's really fun to mess with. Daniel Lenoir uses it a lot, and I know The Edge from U2 probably popularized playing through this box, but didn't even know that until I started looking into it. But anyway, it's a cool box. I would say if you see one, get it, because they're probably expensive. This episode of Track Breakdown is going to be maybe more gear heavy, maybe more plug-in talk, maybe less songwriting oriented, because I got a lot of questions about gear and tonage. So I wanna answer those. So going with the drum thing, I've received a lot of comments about questions and comments about my drum sounds and how I get them. And I guess I'll talk about it for a while. This song is going to be different than most songs that I work on, actually, because this one has more of a real disco kick snare situation. Absolutely no cymbals or overheads in this recording. It was just a kick mic and a snare mic, so most of my songs are not like that. But there are some principles that I always stick to. This song, actually, I played drums on, and so it's heavily edited. I mean, I'm not a drummer, so I probably quantize that shit. But usually I don't do that with the drummers I work with. And that brings me to my first rule of getting good drum sounds. Obviously there are always exceptions to this, because I broke that rule in this song, but find yourself a really tasteful, tone-conscious, special drummer to work with. Find someone who's not going to overplay and who knows how to hit the drum to get a great recording sound out of it, which is usually, playing lightly. Find someone who's going to show up and ask you for paper towels and gaff tape and all the things to prepare the drum for that day to make its best sounds, all that kind of stuff. It's all, tone is in the hands, as they say, as my friends always say, and they're right. But also there's some things you can do to augment that, and I'll go through some of that. But for me, it's good drummer rule. And then number 2, don't over mic things. Like don't put up like 10 drum mics. If that's your thing, that's your thing, and that's cool. And maybe you get sounds you like that way. But I'm just kind of lazy, and I don't like doing that. It wastes time, and I end up messing with them all later, and it's just not very fun to me. I find that phase coherency is a lot cleaner the less microphones you have up in the air. So I usually stick to like 3, 4, or 5 mics on my drum sets. It's going to be a dynamic in front of the kick. It's going to be a dynamic on the snare. It's going to be either a mono ribbon overhead or a stereo pair of ribbons. It's either like a 40-38 or 2 160s. And that usually just gets it, it helps me find the punch that I'm always looking for, and ribbons have that, luxurious top end for cymbals. Obviously I break that rule. Sometimes I put a Fat 47 in front of the kick, like a foot out, because, I don't know, I'm feeling fancy that day or something, but you don't have to overdo it. And then once I record it, a lot of you asked about like tape and my process with tape, and I guess I'm not too precious. If it's suitable for that day and it makes sense in the workflow and people's energy, like I love working on tape, but sometimes it doesn't make sense and sometimes it's a pain, so I just skip it. But I do recommend working on it enough so that you can like envision that sound in your head and then make that happen regardless of your setup. that's kind of how I feel about gear in general. Is I don't think you need to max out your Vintage King credit cards on fancy tube gear, although we've all dabbled in Vintage King's credit line, I'm sure. But Vintage King, hello. Yeah, I recommend working with that gear. Rent some studio time, get a feel for it, get that sound in your head, and then take it with you, you know? I mean, we can't all afford to have U67s and LA2As. I certainly cannot, and that's okay, because I have the sound in my head, it's logged in the toolbox, and with FabFilter Pro Q, I can usually kind of emulate most things. And UAD's plugins, they're incredible. So, and drum sounds. There's my kick drum. On this, it's just like totally tight, like disco kick. A lot. I think it's gated. I have an SPL transient designer just taking away the resonance. You know, that's just the kick drum. And then it's a Bear M88. And then I have another Bear mic on the snare. Again, it's SPL transient. There's some Pro Q. There's a Pultec on it, 1176, and the Mag EQ with the airband up. Yeah, I mean, it sounds pretty good. Yeah, disco kick snare. What more do you need? Well, for some reason I decided I needed a little more attack on the kick drum sound, so I sampled. I did like a replacement, you know, I think I used like the Macy free drum sample thing. I don't do it often, so I haven't bought like a good plugin to do that with. But anyway, I triggered this sample from the kick drum, which is, I think, a sample from the Prophet, or no, what was it? I don't remember. I have just a big slew of 80s drum machine samples. That's mixed in there. So that's your drum sound. It's 3 things. Took that beat from this band called The Jellies. What's the name of that song? We're doing okay, we're doing all right. Something on a Saturday night. Cool disco song. Or New York downtown. Weird experimental disco or something, I don't know. Drum bus, Pultec, definitely. Doing that the Pultec thing, you know, where you boost and then you attenuate. Does that magic thing, play around with it till it feels good. Studer plugin, tape, saturation. Harrison 32C EQ UAD, probably my favorite EQ plugin right now in terms of like vibey modeling EQs or whatever. Solid State Logic G bus compressor. That's it. And then you add the I didn't play a hi-hat in this beat because that drum machine loop was kind of taking care of all that business. Someone asked about the bass tone. Let's see. I mean, I usually play bass. It's always my Mustang on this record. Fender Mustang, new one. It's cute. And then sometimes I play through my Cali 76 compressor pedal, which is like 1176 style in a pedal. And I use the LA2A, the gray one, with some sidechain, their emphasis thing, so it's leaving some low end, but just to smooth out things, because that Mustang it's pretty uneven. It just, notes pop out, and it's just the nature of what it is. Some more Pro Q. I use Pro Q on every channel. I don't know. It's very useful. This time I'm boosting 569. I usually boost somewhere in there. I'm ducking 1 to 2 in there, 100 to 200. Shelved at 74. That was like, I guess, an awakening for me when I just started like rolling off low end in the bass and letting the kick speak for that low end. I mean, you can do either or. Some people prefer to let the bass speak the subs and the kick to articulate that. I mean, it can be. It was on my last record I flip-flopped, but on this one I'm more kick heavy. So that technique is wonderfully. There's a wonderful example of that if you check out like Beatles multi-tracks, if you can get your hands on them. But like Taxman, the bass sound is so incredibly huge, and the kick drum, like when you're listening to it, it doesn't register as that's the bass like blowing everything out. It sounds like kick. It sounds like a big umphy kick drum. But when you listen to the drums by themselves, they're do do do, extremely squashed, and the bass sound is just like huge. Anyway, they did good things, those Beatles. So that's the bass sound. Yeah, I used Dimension D on this bass sound. I was looking for a little sass. And I'm looking for my cell phone because it has the questions. Cool. What's another question? Someone asked about the bass. What's your favorite instrument to track? The bass. At least in this record, on this record, it was the bass. Some people asked about the synthesizers. So I'll talk about those. People asked, what is that nice warbly synth doing? And this is my my Prophet Rev 2, which I've grown quite fond of because it's so easy to manipulate, and I think there's a lot you can do with it, and it's just so useful. In this instance, I kind of programmed it to kind of sounds like a Juno. I mean, but that chorus is really special. It's chorusing between a couple the two oscillators, and the LFOs there are 4 LFOs that you can assign to do different sorts of modulation. So I think I kind of just played around with those until it felt squishy enough. And then it has this great little feature called oscillator slop, which just kind of emulates some pitchy oscillators from the 70s or something. Anyway, Prophet Rev 2, amazing instrument. There's a DX7. There's some DX7 stabs. That's like a DX7 timpani sound that's heavily compressed and has a stereo delay on it, a short one. There's this cool arpeggio thing. So that's the arpeggiator from the Prophet sending information to the DX7, and the Prophet was receiving time code from Pro Tools. So, but in that transfer of information, there was this kind of lag, which I thought was really musical. And that's why it sounds kind of like it hiccups. And it's, there's obviously a delay on there. I probably was using a guitar pedal. Maybe. I don't see a plug-in, so it must have been a pedal. Or maybe it was probably actually the Korg box. Because that was the all-star of this track. Synths, guitars, drum machines, and drums. A lot of you asked about my vocal setup, and I generally like to skip over that, but I'll get into it. I usually use a dynamic mic, but on this one I think I was looking for a little more air, so I used a condenser. At the time I was actually using that Townsend Labs mic. I bought one to try it out, and I kept it for like a month, and I thought it was cool. It did the modeling thing, but it turned out to be like, I just didn't want to rely on like a plug-in in all my tracking situations. So it just, because you need to use a plug-in to like decode it to model all those cool microphones. Anyway, it was nifty. I think I modeled like a 67, but I ended up selling it. But I used it on this vocal.
As thick as thieves, I know it's true. It's time to melt, it's what we do.
So yeah, there's a double, obviously, and then I'll just go through the vocal bus. Fab filter, multi-band, a de-esser, LA2A, the Devil Lock, you know, that thing by Sound Toys, but just with a little bit of grit added, because the mix knob is really useful on that thing. And just some more EQ. That's your dry sound.
And I dream about you.
And then I sent all that through my guitar pedals.
And I dream about you.
And that's, I think that was my Memory Man, like one of the old big ones, into Ibanez Chorus, which is stereo output. And those sound cool together.
And I dream about you.
And then for reverb, I used UAD AMS. Because, you know, those emulations of early 70s digital reverbs are hot shit right now, for a good reason. It sounds so cool. I really like it.
And I dream about you. I have no word.
Oh. Glitch. Okay, so that brings us to one of my favorite parts of the song, which is my friend Michael Coleman's Moog solo, which is just so expertly crafted. I think he sounds like Lenny Tristano playing a synthesizer. Lenny Tristano was a pianist from the 50s and 60s who kind of had his own school of West Coast bop. Anyway. It's so cool and so serpentine and so emotional at the same time. It's so beautiful. That sound, the classic Moog sound. Michael uses the Behringer Model D, and a lot of people have some things to say about Behringer, but hey, it sounds good when Michael plays it. Sounds really good. I didn't do anything to it. I did add some reverb that is a guitar pedal, I think. My boss reverb pedal, which you may laugh, but I like it sometimes. And it's very compressed, and you can hear it open up at the end of his phrases, which I think is kind of fun. Right? I mean, especially at this end one. Yeah. I mean, there's claps. I would say with claps, like, always do your own. Don't just use a sample, record some claps. It's fun. And you might stumble across the best clap sound of your life. Do you compress on the way to tape or leave a lot to mixing stage? When I'm working on tape, I do try to use compression just because, not aggressively, but to get the signal to noise ratio to be happy, you gotta hit the tape with an appropriate level. And that's kind of why they came up with compressors, I think. So that they could get signal loud enough without distorting. Because if you don't get the signal loud enough, you get a lot of hiss. So yeah. When I do work on tape, I try to get that signal nice and up front. Do you feel like you're incorporating more of your influences now? Probably. I'm quite the sponge. I'm also kind of moving up to the country and getting out of the city and getting my own space and my own kind of little room to get weird in has been incredible. I never really had the space to explore in Brooklyn. Obviously I loved my time in Brooklyn, and it was really crucial to my development as an artist and as a person. And but it's nice to be like out here and spacing out and playing with stuff. Mainly just like being able to have an idea at 1 a.m. and just pursue it instead of, freaking out about my upstairs neighbor. My camera has stopped recording, so I'm just going to go back to talk about the console. Let's see. Someone said thoughts on busing and summing and all of that. So I use this console primarily as a summing mixer. It's 16 line amps, and then I have some mic channels that I use if I run out of channels in my rack. But primarily I just use it for summing and tracking to tape. It's great because it has this 8-bus section that works marvelously with the Tascam for stereo bus groups. But so I'll hit the preamps in the rack and then come into the line inputs for monitoring, and then I will submix and send them to the buses, and those go to tape. Yeah, pretty standard. But anyway, this console is made by Wheatstone. They're a company that made broadcast equipment throughout the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, and they're still around. And actually, my dad works for them. So they're working in the digital space like everyone else now, but back in the day they were competing with Harrison and SSL, and they made these desks for radio stations, and they're all different and they're all configured differently. But if you can find them, usually you can get them for free because stations are just updating and putting these things on the street, which is how I got this. But it's great. It's clean and easy to work with. I have a bunch of extra channel strips, so when things break, it's not a big deal. Everything is, it's modular, so I can pull out channel strips easily. It's been a great little console for what I'm doing here. Obviously, I'd love to throw down on a big chunky Neve someday, but this is cool for now. So yeah, that's what I use this for. Someone asked about preamps. I have a rack of preamps that I use for tracking. I have a Neve 33114 that I bought from the studio I used to work at in Brooklyn called Figure 8. I have some Langevins that I'm borrowing from a friend. I have some Focusrites that I'm also borrowing from a friend. Just making it happen. But I recently got one of those Cranbourne Audio 500 series ADAT boxes, and I'm kind of working on filling that in and building some preamps for that. But whatever it takes to get it done. It's nice to have one really nice pre for vocals and, like flushing out a recording. Just, I don't know. Any MS stuff? Yes. But sometimes I used to do more tracking in MS, like especially when you have like two ribbons or whatever. But mostly I just use MS processors. Like Goodhertz has a mid-side processor that's great. How'd you get that insane lead guitar sound? Oh, we talked about that with the Korg. Do you keep your monitors on when tracking vocals like you did in Easy to Love? Usually, but on this one I probably didn't because I was using a condenser. So I probably had them off. Drum mics, bass chain, got it. Vocal compression settings. Usually my go-to is just to have an 1176 fast attack, fast release, and then an LA2A just catching the rest. I think that's pretty common. What's the percussion? Talked about that. What's your vocal chain? Talked about it. Vocal, drums. Yeah. I think I answered most of the things. Thanks for showing up and listening, and it's fun to talk about this stuff, and I can go down the rabbit hole with y'all anytime. But it's been fun to present this record to you, and yeah, keep on doing the thing, all of you home recordists out there. I think a big takeaway about gear is that it really just doesn't matter. Just try to project those sounds in your head and make them happen with whatever plugins you have. Or rent some studio time and capture some cool stuff. It's, I'm not too precious, but thanks for listening. Have a wonderful day.